Maybe I feel honored that I'm going to be able to introduce James Anderson, our president and CEO. Could we just have a minute in prayer? And Dave Swanson said he would lead that, and maybe a couple people just lay some hands on James, because he needs all the help he can get. We all do, but I think as we need, our leader needs to know that we're behind him. He's laughing. All right. Dave Swanson, here you go, bro. You want the...
Lord Jesus, we just thank you for this moment. We thank you for all the moments this weekend, but I thank you for James. I thank you for the call. I thank you for your heart that you've deposited in him for men, for guys like us. I thank you that you have given him incredible skills, incredible gifts. You've given him an incredible family. You've given him so many opportunities that he could spend his time in countless ways, serving you and serving others. But you chose him for this. And for that, we all give you thanks and praise. And we just ask your continued blessing and protection and encouragement and strength day to day. I thank you that he strengthens himself in you. I thank you that he counts on you moment by moment and gives you thanks for all the public and the private victories. In Jesus' name.
Thank you, David. For those of you that don't know, James is Jim Lane's predecessor, but Jim Lane chose James. So, Jim, we give this thanks to you for choosing a good man to go on after your tenure. I'll be real brief because James has a lot of fun things to say. He attended Biola University in Los Angeles. So I guess you were born in Los Angeles, or Wheaton. He studied screenwriting and film directing. Kind of interesting, a lot of marketing. I think the best decision he ever made in his life was marry Carrie, and they've been married for over 20 years, and they have two beautiful children, Charlie May and Lucy. And then James went on to be a super high-end seller of, and builder, I believe, of luxury homes in LA. And he earned, for like 4 years in a row, a quadruple platinum sales award, whatever that means. Made a lot of money. And he was also in his early years a film director for this production company. So his last thing before NCS was he worked as Focus on the Family, handling the West Coast donor relations. So now I know why last night you said you're a money raiser. James will come up and talk.
So I got asked to tell my story, so for some reason I'm here twice. So I alluded a little bit to it last night, but yeah, this is a tender season for me because it was right at this season of life, October 28th, was the day that my wife found out that everything that she hoped wasn't true about me was true. And that all the things that I'd worked very hard to help her believe were also not true. So I was born in Wheaton, grew up in Colorado, come from a family that, I have parents that love each other, loved us. And I came from a family that told me a lot about love, but I had a hard time figuring out what that meant. So I knew they liked me, I just didn't know why. And so what I just kept realizing is that there's more and more places to find that opportunity to figure out, why do people love me? And if you're a young man, that's the first place to do that is in any sort of athletics or sports or things like this. And so I began there, and I just kept earning, and I just kept proving that you can love me because I'll be good enough. And whatever was good enough yesterday will never be enough today, and I'll just keep working harder. And if that sounds exhausting and crazy, it really is. But I lived my life that way. And then I just kept saying, well, what's the next biggest pond? Like, what is the next biggest thing that I could try? Because I just want to make sure I'm staying ahead of the curve. So it was going from a small town to going to LA. It was going from LA into, or from Biola into USC, and it was going from USC into film production. It was going not just into film production, but into something at Paramount Pictures. And I just kept saying, I think I can go higher. I think I can go bigger to this. And I just was training myself to essentially be an addict to an economy of performance. And so I went to school at Biola, studied film and marketing there, and screenwriting, and one of my professors also was a professor at USC, and he said, James, I think you should come and study with us there and keep kind of growing in this way. And of course that fit perfectly with my MO, which is just the harder it is, the more I want to try to do it. And after that, I went to work at this film production company, and this man gave me incredible opportunities, just showed me incredible love and favor, much like the story of Joseph, just for no good reason, just gave me incredible opportunities. Worked on a lot of different films, and one of the things I just kept learning again and again was, you might be smarter than other people. Like, actually, yeah, no one else can do this. People aren't doing this. Like, all these other people you came in with, they just keep thinning the herd. And, like, just keep going, James. And somewhere inside of me was a sense that I was superior and that I was smarter and that I could do things everyone else could not. Well, this is a cancer that began to continue to show up in my life when I started working in sales and really high-end real estate. And when that happens, you know, the amount of paperwork and Saturdays you spend is the same whether the house is $300,000 or $10 million. So I thought, well, why not get paid for the paperwork? So let's do the high-end stuff. But everybody wants those clients, and so I had to figure out how to be smarter and how to be more clever and how to be ahead of that. And I began to learn again and again and again that I was doing it better. And then when all the parts that are broken in me met with all the people who wanted to be around me, it was a perfect storm of destruction. So I was suddenly around people that were saying, you're smarter than everyone else, James. You're more clever than everyone else. Like, you're doing things other people can't. And that cancer basically paved the way for me to be able to say, well, then I'll do whatever I want. Because maybe the rules don't really apply to me. And in fact, I'm not totally sure I need this Jesus, because I think I can do most of what Jesus does. So I can do most of this. I just can't do the very last, the chemical part. He's got to come in with the blood. But I can clean up most of it. And I made an absolute critical error in believing that the God that I had met when I was 5 and 6 years old was the God that was actually waiting for me. And so, Paul, much like you talked about last night, I still knew a Sunday school Jesus, a flannel graph Jesus. And that guy was not big enough to hang my whole life on. And so when my world came crumbling down was when my wife knew that I was messing around. She just didn't know with who, and she didn't know where. So she grabbed my phone, and, well, I was at Bible study, of all things, and began to basically look for the proof, which wasn't hard to find. And I came home to a note that was taped to our banister. It just said, I know, and I'm gone. And she was. So my wife took our 2 young girls and just disappeared and flew back for a session of counseling. I just asked her, can we meet with somebody? And she said yes. And it was it's right in this season of the year in which I was basically taking the great accounting of my life, and I was coming up short. in a big, big way. I had borrowed from places I couldn't pay back for the amount of things that I said, it's just going to be okay. And as I made an account of my life, I realized I had made a mess of it, and that when I was in control, it would probably always end up this way. And so coming up on November 11th is actually kind of my D-Day with God. And it was in that period of time I just said, you can have this life because I don't have any need for it, actually, if this is it. And if you want it, come and get it. Which is hilarious, really, to say to God, come and get it. Careful. Show the cheddar. Yeah. But my experience was that I knew a very small God, and I knew a very cheap grace. And for any of you that have ever stood and looked into the face of someone who had to carry the pain of something you've done, you know that grace is actually a very weighty thing. And I knew a thin Jesus. I knew a Zeus-like God that hung just outside the baptismal at my small church. And I knew a very cheap grace until it was mine, and it was my issues that needed to be dealt with. And suddenly I was introduced to a very weighty grace. And I was introduced to a Jesus that I finally understood why he was separate and different, what his role was in the 3 chairs that Paul was talking about last night. Because before that I was like, yeah, you know, it's all interchangeable. It's just whatever. And I understood the essence of why God had created, why this was created in 3 ways. And so, you know, I'll say that I was, when I did this great sort of accounting of my life, I went down through, very similar to an AA style. I just thought, I'm just going to write down everything I think I've done wrong. It was a long list. Started with the obvious things and then turned into trivial things and then turned into the kind of things you talk about at camp, at the campfire. And, you know, it was, some of these things were just, it was an outpouring of regret. And I just realized how much I have in my life that I'm at odds with, that I haven't ever given attention to or dealt with. So I started making this list, and I have this legal pad, and I don't really know what to do with it. And I decided to go to, I was in Yosemite at the time, camping. I just decided I have to get out and get away. It was Thanksgiving, so everybody wants me to come and don't be alone. And I'm like, man, do I ever need to be alone right now? And so I camped in the snow, 2.5 feet of snow in Yosemite for 3 days, and just made my list and made my my grand accounting of life. And I didn't know what to do with it. And so I'm walking by the climbing store, and I go in and I bought a red Sharpie, and I just kept thinking, this will be therapeutic. But I went through across every page, and I just wrote, my grace is sufficient for you, James, from 2 Corinthians 12. And I took all that, and I just, I wrote it. I wrote his truth on it, and then I threw it into the fire at the Big Lodge on my last day there. One of the things I realized is that actually that's the easy part, that his grace is sufficient for me. The second part of that verse actually really sucks, because then it says, therefore I'll boast all the more gladly about my weakness, so that Christ's power can rest on me. That's why I delight in his sake, for weakness, insults, hardships, persecutions, and difficulties, because when I am weak, and he is strong. So that's the second part of my story, is realizing that that has to be a part of what I do now, is that sharing the fact that somehow I got a chance to push the bar up off my chest when I really thought I was done, is a big part of the story of how Christ came and got me. So I went from a very wrecked life that was very secret and full of all kinds of dark places that I was intent on keeping hidden. I was positive that if you knew all of me, you would be all of gone. And therefore, I had committed to myself, there are some things I will never even acknowledge to myself. Subconsciously, they will go with me to my grave, because if I acknowledge them, then I have to do something with them. And if I have to do something with them, I don't know what that is, because I don't have a big enough God. So when I found a God that really could hold me and actually just caught me, just grabbed me in my free fall, and I made peace with those things, it was then that he showed me the second part of the verse, which is, and now, big boy, you don't get to keep it a secret. So to me, I have a great love of story. It started when I was a kid. It started when I was watching movies, and then I loved writing stories and telling the stories of lots of people, and the passion for creating stories. That obviously played very well into my work in screenwriting and storytelling in that way. But the important thing now is that it's my job to tell my story. And then in doing so, it frees you up to tell your story. And that when we have the same story, and a lot of us do, we find the moment that Tim Keller talks about where you realize you too have that. You too have this great love of this, or come from this place. You too have a need for this great big God. And so I feel like it's an important part of my life and a continuation of my story to share my story. And to share that I found a much bigger God who taught me, instead of the economy of performance, an economy of grace. A very weighty and heavy grace. And for it, I'll forever be thankful.